Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Previously, let me introduce myself. My name is Umi Nurjana Zahra. I am from the first semester of English education. Here, I will read the material to fulfill final test. Everything in its place. 3 contact set language listen. Have you ever gone grocery shopping without a list? It might seem like a good idea at first, but then you wonder aimlessly. You have some vague idea of that you need and why you need it, but that idea isn't concrete of the type. In the end, it's amazing that you end up getting the things you really want or need. If you do manage to remember them, it is only by chance. That keen of how it is to learn vocabulary out of context. You can present your student with vocabulary list and grammar exercise, but without any knowledge of why they're learning what they're learning. These activities feel aimless to them. If your student the accurate knowledge with any context, it's probably by chance. But setting context in a language lesson betrayedly, a foreign language classroom, more than almost any other kind of classroom, can feel disconnected from the live context in which the material being taught will be used. Setting context in a way that feels natural rather than forget can be very challenging. So how can you bring context in your language lesson? What concrete steps can you take to make vocabulary lists and grammar concepts come to life in an environment which often feels so difficult? Why is context important? First, in case you need any more persuading, here's a brief explanation of exactly what context is and why it is so foundational to a great language lesson. Context is simple path, the antithesis of learning a language. Without context, the texts of language learning are nothing more than meaningless rituals. Your students are memorizing lists of words they'll never use. They're acquiring grammar rules for situations that exist only within the cover of a textbook. Essentially, without context, your entire curriculum takes place within an imaginary universe that no one cares about. Context provides the real life situation in which language is used. Setting context allows your student to get at least a simulation of real life practice. It might not be practical to take them on a trip to experience the target language in person, but you can give them a context that prepares them for the day when they might do just that. Context is most authentic motivator in the language classroom. Sure, you can try giving out prizes or motivate your student with good grades and compliment. But the best motivation is intrinsic. Your student want the satisfaction of knowing they can accomplish a challenging and useful task when language is put in context. It gives students that interest motivation they need. So now that you know teaching language in context important, how Exactly, do you do it? How to set context in a language lesson. It is not easy to give a language lesson a meaningful context in the classroom. In this post, we'll cover some context ideas for creating context-based lesson. But first, here are some tricks you can use to introduce context in any lesson. Build connection. It's on the 5 costs of language learning for a reason. Connections are critical to the process of language learning, precisely because they make it easier to set a context. One way to do this by connecting the subject of the lessons to something in the lives of your student. And then, for example, you at the royal wedding. Can anyone describe a wedding they've been to? Let's brainstorm some word we use to talk about weddings. You might also make a connection to a TV show or a celebrity that your students enjoy. Another helpful way to build connection is by starting with something they already know about their own language. Give me some word to describe this picture. What do these words have in common? They are adjectives. Let's talk about adjectives in target language. Perfect example of the real life situation in which the vocabulary will be used if food vocabulary is on the agenda. Begin by talking about what it's like to go to a restaurant in the target country culture. If you're teaching vocabulary about travel, talk about situation your student might encounter at an important train station or hotel. For example, you could show your intermediate French class the YouTube video working at a hotel in Paris. Fill the text word video like music videos, movies, trailers, news, and inspiring tales and trim the interpersonal language learning lessons. All of the videos for each language are categorized by level, format, and topic, so it is easy to find a video that appreciates for demonstrating real life context or virtual any subject to any student. Keep the same context throughout the lessons. It is important to keep your goals in view for the entire duration of lessons. Switching from one context to other can be confusing. Provide a variety of activities to practice speaking, reading, writing, and listening to text and conversation that fit within the same context. And for example, if you're teaching vocabulary for visiting the doctor office, you might have students listen to a record conversation between a doctor and a patient. Read an informational article about healthcare in the target culture and create a skit or a dialogue on the topic to act off for the class. Here are some ideas to bring context to life in your classroom. Ready? Set context. 3. Context setting for language lesson. Here are some specific examples of lesson in which the context is clearly set and remains clear throughout the lessons. Visit to a restaurant. Begin by talking to the student about a recent visit to a popular restaurant, preferably one that they consider a favorite. Tell about the food served, the menu, and your interaction with the service. Then move on to describe what a restaurant is like in the target culture. What are some different kinds of restaurants that are popular? Cafes, pubs, fast food. What kinds of food would they be like to serve? What are the menus like? If you have a sense to any sort of religious sex as menu or photos, then can bring life to the discussion. Allow the discussion to move to kind of language you use in a restaurant. What do you say to a serve when you are something? How do you ask for more information about an item of the menu? How might you talk about the meal with those at the table with you? Next, model some of the vocabulary that might be used in the conversation, asking the class to repeat the words after you. When they've heard the words a few times, try giving them a passage to listen to wide relevant vocabulary. And for example, this transcript and exercises from audio are ideal for advanced Spanish students. When they've had some practice with this word and pairs, ask them to compose and enact their own creative skits taking place in a restaurant, the target culture. If you have plastic food and an authentic table setting, it can add to the sense of rural context. Slang words and idioms. Begin by asking students to brainstorm words and expressions that mean something different for their literal translation, i.e. raining cats and dogs, gods and arm and leg. Ponder the difficulty of trying to translate such expression to some who doesn't know the language. Next, go over a list of common expressions in the target language. The nice thing about this is that many of such idioms for the actually quite funny. For example, the French have the wonderful expression "occupe-toi de tes onions," take care of your onions. For telling someone to mind his own business, you can find other funny idioms in various languages on this third blog list as well as all over the French learners blogs. Here are just a few examples. French idiom by the Brussels 22 delicious authentic phrases. Wordwise 9 famous Spanish proverbs and idioms. Speak English natural with 37 common English idioms. The mega list of 50 channels colored with related idioms and cultural notes. Then, you can read a passage or act out a funny scan employing as many of these idioms as possible. Be as dramatic as possible with gesture, voice, and even props and costume of maximum effect. Next, give students a fill-in-the-blank activity in which the mouse goes the slang word of expression that makes the most sense as a completion. Finally, have students write their own silly stories using as many of the slang words and expressions as possible, and then share them. Holiday celebration. This is best done in the context of holiday you're presently celebrating. For example, if this close to Easter, you might make a connection to the Chinese Screaming Festival weeks, like Easter is a spring holiday with themes of deeds and rebirth. Present information about the target cultural holiday. And then ask students to create and Venn diagram revealing similarities and differences to the holiday they celebrate in their own culture. In the process, I'm in vocabulary word for talking about the celebration, balloons, God's decoration. Next, give students a simple reading in the target language about the holiday. Finally, ask students to record videos in which they recreate that particular holiday celebration using relevant vocabulary. More than anything else, context will bring language to life for students. So if nothing else seems to working, try putting your lesson in their proper context and see what a difference it can make. That's all from me. Sorry if there are mistakes. I end. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.